Hello, welcome to Math 1324. This is Chapter 10, Section 1, Example 8. In this example, we want to give the domain and range of the following function. Then, use the graph to find f of -2, f of 0, f of a half, and any values of x such that f of x equals 4. Okay, so let's start with the first portion of this. There's actually 5 different questions here, not 4. The first question is actually asking us for both the domain and the range. This is the first time we're asked for the range. So let's do that. For the domain will always be the x-axis. So let's look at the x-axis. This function, by the way, this is a function because it passes the vertical line test. We'll talk more about that here in just a little bit. But for this function, notice that at these endpoints here, they're stopping. There are closed-in circles there. We're not going anywhere else. There aren't arrows there, in other words. Because of that, this begins at this x value, and there is a curve here. I wish Windows wouldn't do that. There is a curve here, but the curve is technically a line. We'll ignore that. And then it reaches down here, and then there's a curve going up here, curve going up here. And notice that I can do this without ever picking up my pencil. Believe it or not, that was a bit of a tongue twister. And what that means is that I can use every single point between those 2 points. This point here, and this point here. And I can use every x value in between. And so what that means for us, the domain begins at -4 and ends at 2, including both endpoints. And the reason that we have to use interval notation here, it's a requirement here, is because we need every single point in here. We need to make sure that every point is listed there. And this is the only way to do so here. Well, there's another way, but we don't really want to talk about that. Okay. As for the range is all about the y-axis this time. So looking at the y values, think horizontally here. Technically vertically, but we're looking horizontally. Notice that the lowest y value we'll ever reach will actually be on the x-axis. And what's that y value on the x-axis? Well, it's 0. So the lowest the y will ever be is 0. And then what's the highest? Well, there's actually 2 different highest points. They're the same point, or the same highest point. They're the same value of the y-axis. That's weird to say. They're both what we call maxima. Okay, so there's a point here, there's a point here, and both of them have the y value of 8. So the highest will be 8, and because we aren't excluding them, we have to include them as 0 to 8, including both 0 and 8 using square brackets. Good deal. That's A. Well, that's technically unlisted, but yeah, okay. Anyway, let's go on to letter B. Well, letter A, I guess. Weird. Letter A is asking what is f of -2, and notice that here we're told that our x value must be -2, and what it's asking for is the y value. Because the x value must be -2 because that's what's in parentheses. So if the -2 is the x value, let's go to that one. Where is the coordinate? The coordinate's right there. And what's that y value? Well, if we go over to the y-axis, well, it's on the x-axis, so the y value must be 0. So f of -2 equals 0 here. And that's all it is. F of -2 equals 0. Next, let's go to letter B. Letter B is asking for f of 0. Well, go to x being 0, which is happening right here. And then let's go to the coordinate. So here's where x is 0. Go above or below wherever the graph is. The graph is right here. So this coordinate is what we're looking at. What's the y value for that coordinate? Well, the y value is 8, so that means that f of 0 equals 8. That really is all it is. Okay, so now let's look at f of negative 2. Sorry, f of a half, my apologies. Now, 1/2 is halfway between 0 and 1. I know, it's crazy talk. So start there, and then go above or below, whichever way you have to go to get to the graph. So here we have to go above. And I'm going to kind of just use this. And notice that it touches right there, and that means that the coordinate that we're actually looking at will be right there. And ask yourself, what's the y-coordinate? Well, again, if you go back to the y-axis, well, the y-coordinate there is 6. So it means that f of a half is 6. Good. And this actually brings us to something that's actually very interesting here. For this, notice that the x here, the y is here, the x is here, the y is here, the x is here, the y is here. These are very similar to coordinates, negative 2, 0. In fact, they are the coordinates that you have here. This coordinate here is negative 2, 0. The next coordinate that we see here is 0, 8. And 0, 8 is this coordinate here. And again, notice that these are, in fact, x and y intercepts there. And for the last one, the coordinate would be 1/2, 6, which means that that would be the coordinate there. So function notation has another benefit to it in that it can kind of show us what the coordinates are going to be. As for letter D is a little bit weird because it says any values of x such that f of x equals 4. Now remember, f of x is the y value. In other words, we want to know when is y equal to 4. Well, notice that we have the 4 right here for the y. In other words, if I was to draw a horizontal line here at 4, I want to know where on the x-axis is this happening. In other words, where does this graph cross that horizontal line? Well, it happens in 3 different places. It happens here, it happens here, and it happens here. What are those x values? Well, just go down to the x-axis. You have one there, that would be negative 3. You have one here, that would be negative 1. And you have one here. That would be 1. So for letter D, the answer is x equals negative 3, negative 1, and 1. So all 3 of those. Now, I don't know how my math lab is going to want you to type that in. Just make sure you read what it asks for. Alrighty. Well, there you go. I hope you learned something. I'm sure I might have. I will see you all in the next video. Have fun.